Meet the old Air Force One. This aircraft has carried 6 different U.S. presidents, and it entered service back when the Soviet Union was still a thing. And this is supposed to be the new Air Force One. It's larger, newer, and more advanced in almost every way. But there's one tiny problem. When it comes to surviving a missile attack, the old airplane may actually have the advantage. And that gets really interesting. Military aircraft have several ways of protecting themselves from incoming missiles. One of the most famous is the flare. When a heat-seeking missile comes looking for the aircraft's hot engines, the plane can fire flares that produce an intense burst of heat. The missile sees the flare and, if the system works, gets distracted by a much more attractive target. But here's where things get interesting. These technologies aren't exclusive to fighter jets. In 2003, shortly after taking off from Baghdad, an Airbus DHL cargo aircraft was struck by a shoulder-fired missile, commonly known as a man-pads. The aircraft was badly damaged, but the crew somehow managed to bring it back and land safely. The incident raised a terrifying question. What if civilian airliners could defend themselves? So, in the years that followed, 10 FedEx cargo aircraft were equipped with a laser-based missile defense system for a 12-month proof-of-concept program. The system could detect and track an incoming missile and then fire a powerful infrared laser toward its seeker. Think about that for a second. A civilian cargo plane was being equipped with a system designed to defeat incoming missiles. So, how is it possible that in 2026, the aircraft carrying the President of the United States could have fewer defensive capabilities? Well, because the aircraft you're looking at isn't actually the Air Force One the U.S. Air Force originally ordered. The real next-generation Air Force One fleet consists of 2 heavily modified Boeing 747-8 aircraft, officially designated VC-25B. Back in July 2018, Boeing received a $3.9 billion contract to deliver the first aircraft by 2024. But the project didn't exactly go according to plan. By 2026, Boeing had reportedly lost around $2.8 billion on the deal, while delays pushed delivery toward 2028. And that was a problem, because waiting until 2028 wasn't exactly an attractive option. Then came a rather extraordinary alternative. Just 3 months later, Qatar offered the U.S. government a gift. A roughly $400 million Boeing 747-8 originally built for the Qatari royal family. Yes, a $400 million aircraft as a gift. And the timing made the story even more unusual. Just days before the announcement, President Trump had reportedly left Mar-a-Lago, traveled toward Palm Beach International Airport, and toured that very same Qatari aircraft. Coincidence? You can decide. But the controversy didn't end with the ethics of accepting a luxury aircraft from a foreign government, because turning a luxury Boeing 747 into a presidential command center is not exactly a weekend renovation project. You can't just repaint it, install a few secure phones, check under the seat cushions for microphones, and call it Air Force One. The aircraft needs secure communications, hardened electronics, specialized command and control systems, protection against electromagnetic threats, and, critically, defensive systems designed to help protect the president from hostile attacks. And then another company entered the picture, L3 Harris. Instead of waiting years for Boeing to transform the Qatari aircraft, L3 Harris was brought in to modify it. And somehow, they completed the work in roughly 10 months. That's incredibly fast for an aircraft this complex. But there was a catch. To meet that aggressive schedule, some of the modifications planned for the permanent Air Force One aircraft were left out. That's why the Qatari aircraft received the designation VC-25B bridge. The Air Force maintained that the modifications did not compromise the president's security. But then reality created a rather uncomfortable question. The aircraft was officially unveiled at Joint Base Andrews on June 19, 2026. During the ceremony, President Trump announced that he would no longer fly on the old VC-25A, and less than 3 weeks later, the new aircraft made its first international trip, carrying the president to a NATO summit in Ankara, Turkey. But then something happened that turned the entire story upside down. While President Trump was in Turkey, a country bordering Iran, the United States launched major strikes against Iranian targets. The next day, instead of immediately returning to the United States aboard the new Qatari aircraft, the president departed Turkey aboard the old Air Force One. Officially, Trump said he wanted to fly the old aircraft for old time's sake. But according to reporting from the New York Times, there was another reason. The Secret Service had reportedly urged him to switch aircraft. Why? Because the VC-25B bridge reportedly lacked some of the defensive countermeasures found on the older Air Force One, including advanced anti-missile capabilities. And suddenly, that tiny difference between the old airplane and the new airplane didn't seem so tiny anymore. The supposedly newer aircraft wasn't necessarily the aircraft you'd want flying through a dangerous environment. And that wasn't the end of the problems. Less than 2 weeks later, President Trump announced that the brand new presidential aircraft was going back into the shop. The aircraft was about to receive even more modifications. But nobody seems to know exactly how much this upgrade will ultimately cost. Estimates have reportedly ranged from around $400 million to as much as $1 billion. And here's where the story gets even stranger. Take the lower-level exit. Permanent Air Force One aircraft are designed with retractable stairs built into the belly of the aircraft. That means the president can potentially enter or exit without depending entirely on ground crews and external airport stairs. And that's more important than it sounds, because in an emergency, the last thing you want is for the president's evacuation plan to depend on somebody on the ground trying to figure out why the stairs aren't working. But there is another capability that raises an even bigger question: aerial refueling. Traditionally, Air Force One has had the ability to refuel in the air, allowing the president to remain airborne for an extended period during a national emergency. After 9/11, President George W. Bush remained aboard Air Force One for hours, while security officials determined when and where it was safe for him to land. But here's the surprising part. The Qatari aircraft doesn't necessarily need that capability, because even the two permanent VC-25B aircraft Boeing is expected to deliver around 2028 won't have aerial refueling. The capability was removed from the program as part of efforts to reduce cost and complexity. So let's step back and look at the bigger picture. America has spent billions developing the next generation of presidential aircraft. The original program has suffered enormous delays and massive cost overruns. A foreign government then offered a $400 million aircraft as a gift. That aircraft was rapidly transformed into a temporary presidential jet. But because it had to be completed so quickly, some of the capabilities planned for the permanent aircraft were left out. And when tensions with Iran suddenly escalated, the president reportedly returned to the older aircraft, the one that had been flying presidents for decades, which creates one of the strangest ironies in modern aviation. The aircraft that looks old. The aircraft that entered service when the Soviet Union still existed. The aircraft that has already carried 6 presidents may still be the one you'd rather have when the sky gets dangerous. Because when you're flying the most important person in America through a potential war zone, being newer isn't necessarily the same thing as being safer.